What's your story that nobody will ever believe? Story 1. Was lying in bed watching a movie and too lazy to move. Saw a small, harmless spider drop down from a thread on the ceiling, obviously heading for the far side of my bed. Even if it was not venomous, I did not want to share my bed with it, but also did not want to move. Not thinking it would actually do anything, I reached out my arm towards it, but still quite a few feet away, and started waving my fingers at it in annoyance. To my absolute surprise, it immediately stopped its descent and actually retracted back up its line while I was sitting there in surprise. Took me a couple of seconds to realize that my hand must have looked like the most giant freaking spider he had ever seen, standing on its back legs and waving the front 5 in a go away, or I will wreck you dance. Story 2, I was at a friend's off-grid cottage with our combined amount of 16 dogs. It is a 1,200-acre property with over 2 kilometers of basically off-roading to get to the cottage itself. With very poor cell reception, we were out for a romp in the woods to take out a problem beaver dam. It diverted a river from draining into the lake and flooding the road instead. So the dam is absolutely massive, like a good 20 feet drop on one side. So we finally get through enough that water started pouring through, and my friend realizes her key fob is missing. Cue massive panic. The other key fob is over a 3-hour drive away. One of her dogs that was up on the dam with us stuck his head into the moving water and pulled out the key fob. Had we not both witnessed it, we would never have believed each other, and trying to tell other people what happened with both of us able to tell the same story is still met with disbelief. Story 3. When I was 8 years old and my sister was 7, we both had the same dream and ended up sleepwalking together in the night out into the middle of the road. Let me give you some backstory. Earlier that day, we had new neighbors move into the house behind us. They had 2 daughters around our age that we quickly made friends with. Well, that night, my sister and I both dreamt we were running in a field full of sunflowers, picking them for our new friends. I felt so happy and carefree in the dream, and I could see my little sister running alongside me, also picking sunflowers. Well, when we woke up, my mom and our neighbors were there, telling us that we had both been sleepwalking around outside together, holding hands, and about to walk into the middle of the street when my neighbors, not the ones we had just met who had just got home, spotted us. The wife ran to grab us, while the husband ran inside his house to get his gun before going into our house to check on my mom. Because we had left the front door wide open, they thought there might have been a break-in. My mom is hard of hearing. She is completely deaf in one ear and only has about 15% of her hearing in her other ear, and wears a hearing aid but takes it off at night to sleep, which is why she never heard us go out the front door. Anyways, after we realized what had happened, we talked about everything and literally recalled all of the same details and remember seeing each other in our dreams. It has now been 20 years, and we still remember everything the same and stick by our memories of that night. I am just grateful to our neighbors, because who knows what would have happened if they did not notice us. Story 4. When I was a kid, 10, I went to the library with my sister, 12, and my mom. My sister and I doing the usual walking up and down the rows of books finding whatever. Eventually we split ways, and a while later I found my mom and asked her where my sister was. She had not seen her. So we go looking in the last area I saw her. She was not there. We go to another section, nope. The next section, nothing. We go to the other side of the library, nothing. We check the bathrooms, outside the doors, and do another lap around the library. Nothing. We asked the library staff if they had seen her, and they had not, but they agreed to start looking. About 30 or so minutes has passed at this point, and we are starting to panic. We continued searching every last corner of that library, and now we have started shouting her name, and others are as well. I would say an hour into it, my stepdad was called, and he was on his way, and he was even stopping cars as they left the library parking lot. This whole time there were 15+ people looking for her and shouting her name. If she was in that library, she would have heard us. My mom was at the front desk, and she picked up the phone to call the police, and my sister comes walking toward her from the kids section, completely unaware of what had happened. She said she was sitting in the kids section, reading a book on skateboarding the whole time. We asked her how long she had been there, and she said maybe 15 minutes. It had been over an hour since we saw her. I do not know what happened that day, but she was absolutely not in that library. We never went back. Story 5. My dog and I were on a walk on our local college campus one weekend, and he nosed a lilac bush that was apparently full of little butterflies. They all took off into the wind and then proceeded to do a perfect little spiral around me. I was so dumbfounded by them all that I was spinning in circles trying to see them all, which probably contributed to them doing a spiral. I was making air currents with my dress. But then it culminated with them landing on my head like a crown, presumably because of the sweat. Butterflies are weird like that. My dog, by this time, is sitting nearby waiting for me to get over it and keep walking, looking majestic as heck with his own little smattering of butterflies hovering around his face. It was wild enough on its own, but then I hear this shuffling and vague gasping sound, and I look in time to see that there was some guy walking by a ways away who had apparently tripped over his own feet from staring. From his perspective, it must have been surreal. I was wearing this fluffy, billowy red dress because I had just gotten back from church, and I always walked my dog barefoot to make sure I never took him on surfaces that were too hot during the warm weather. My dog was this enormous wolf-looking husky mix, and at the time I had longish hair, so for all he knows, he walks out of the library and sees a legit Disney princess in a cloud of butterflies with a giant wolf standing guard. It was the most ethereal and fancy I have ever felt, even without knowing there was a witness. I mean, a cloud of butterflies materialized from a lilac bush to form a living crown. It was breathtaking. Story 6. Back in my substance days, I was at a meth cook's house, and he had just finished a batch off a day or so before and was going to try it by slamming it. He did the plunge, and about 3 seconds went by, and I hear screaming coming from the cookroom. I stand up and go to the room, and he is grabbing his arms and face yelling loud. He stands up and knocks a burner over and spills some kind of liquid all over it, and it just basically explodes half the room. He moved out of the way just enough to not get fully engulfed in the flames and only caught his pants area on fire. So I am helping him move to the bathroom while 2 other guys are putting out the fire. Since he was a cook, he actually had multiple fire extinguishers in his cookroom, and they are getting it surprisingly well. I get him in the shower and I am running water all over him, and he keeps saying he is on fire. All I can see is little bits of blood from his eyes, nose, and palms of his hands. His leg was kind of burnt, but nothing crazy. He is screaming about being on fire still, and I cannot figure out what is up. Hospital time. Turns out he cut his meth all badly, and it had lots of lye in his mix. It was seeping out his pores, eyes, nose, mouth, everywhere. He was in the hospital for almost a month, went to jail for a little over a year. Fire department still came for the fire and saw everything and got completely sober after that. He works as an off-the-books help for a caretaker at local park now. Story 7. My friend and I were just sitting outside a 7-Eleven with some 40s and a packed hash pipe on St. Patrick's Day back in like 2009 or 2008. We were pretty loaded when this Ford Explorer came tearing around the corner like a bat out of hell. He sideswiped a whole row of parked cars, which tore his bumper and a bunch of other stuff off his car. The dude stumbled out of his car, picked up as much of his broken car as he could and stuck it in the back, got back in his car and took off. We were standing there, totally blown away, when less than a minute later a cop came tearing around the same corner. He asked us if we saw what happened. We said yes, and he asked us to come with him to identify the guy. So we grabbed our 40s and the hash pipe and hopped in the back of the cruiser. I asked the cop if I could smoke a cigarette, and he said I could. So then I told him that because of my medical marijuana card, I could smoke cannabis anywhere I could smoke a cigarette, and he just cracked the windows a bit as we hauled absolute ass down the main boulevard, roasting hash and chugging 40s the whole way. The Explorer was pulled over a couple miles away. The cop pulled over and we all got out. Still smoking the hash, we give our statements between puffs and swigs. They confirmed the story since the guy had his bumper in the back, like we explained, and the paint transfer and everything matched the story. The cop dropped us back off at 7-Eleven, at which point we had to buy some more beer and pack another hash bowl. That was a crazy night. Story 8. Tina Fey visits the town I live in every few years because her husband's family lives here. Just a tiny town in Ohio. I was in high school when I learned this because a few classmates worked at Dairy Queen, and she would come in almost every day during their visit. I mentioned this to my best friend, and best friend tells me that her grandmother is actually close friends with Tina Fey's in-laws. Another one is something that happened to one of my teachers in high school. This happened in the mid-2000s. This teacher has an elective class to study song lyrics since he is really into music. Usually 10 students at most take this class every semester. They were analyzing lyrics from a John Mellencamp song, cannot remember which since I heard this story 11 years ago, and ended up writing John a letter saying how they really enjoyed the lyrics. A great surprise to the teacher and class was when John contacted the school. He was doing a show in a nearby city and came in the day before the concert and visited the teacher and students. He gave them tickets to his show for the following day, and they gave him a shirt with the school name and mascot on it. John wore the shirt during the entire concert. Story 9, I work for an airline, and like all other passengers, we are not allowed to bring raw meat into the country. If you get caught smuggling, it is an official warning, plus a note in your dossier. Second time means losing your job. One time I flew back from Brazil carrying this beautiful 1.5 kilo picanha and 1.5 kilo alcatra beef for a nice barbecue. When we arrived at the airport, customs were waiting for us at the crew checkpoint. I was not the only one carrying beef. I stuffed the beef in my carry-on suitcase, and the co-pilot had his beef in his flight bag. The co-pilot walked up to the customs officer, and the officer asked, "Do you have anything to declare?" Stone cold, the co-pilot told him no. "Please put your suitcase in the X-ray, sir." The co-pilot put his suitcase in the X-ray but held on to his flight bag. He walked around the machine and picked up his suitcase, thanked the officer, and walked on. He did not get caught because he did not put his flight bag in the machine. My turn. Where do you come from, and do you have anything to declare, sir? I arrived from Sao Paulo and have nothing to declare. Okay, please put your luggage in the machine. At this point, I thought that I could get away with it. The co-pilot did not have to put his flight bag in the machine, so I would not have to put my carry-on in either, I thought. I put my suitcase in the machine and started to walk around the machine. Sir, did your carry-on come from another destination? No. Then put it in the machine as well. I knew I was done right then. 3 kilos of beef smuggled into the country, that would be an official reprimand plus a note on my dossier. It was too late to tell them I had beef in my carry-on at this time. I put my carry-on in the machine and walked around where the officer was watching the X-ray. There I was, waiting to see the 3-kilo beef appear on the screen and get caught. At that moment, I hear a beer bottle cap sound go once, twice, and even 3 times. The officer reaches into his pocket and opens up his WhatsApp. At that moment, my carry-on scrolls across the screen, clearly showing the beef. The officer opens up a video on his WhatsApp and does not even look up once. He starts laughing and says, "You are good. Have a nice day." I took my suitcase and carry-on and walked away slowly until I reached the corner and started to half run into the crew area, where I quickly said my goodbyes to the crew and went home. It was the best barbecue beef I have ever had in my whole life. Story 10 once had a Shih Tzu that really wanted to see out of the lower window of the front door. The door was in a mudroom, behind an interior door as well. One day I see the dog running in circles in the living room, and he would pick up speed and ram the interior door. Eventually the laminate started cracking. I come home another day, open the interior door, and the dog greets me, fully soaked. I do not pay too much attention to anything and run to see if he had jumped in the toilet. Everything looks fine and dry, but then I look at the carpet in the living room and see wood pieces all over the floor from the interior door. I thought dogs did not sweat from their skin, but could not explain why the dog was wet after having worked all day to destroy the door. He gets reprimanded, and the behavior stops until I come home another day to a wet dog. I immediately check the floor and do not find any wood. Check the bathroom, and it was fine. I close the door and see more destruction, at which point I notice the carpet is not laying flat. I lift it and find the wood pieces from the door under it. He moved the carpet, destroyed more of the door, then put the carpet back. Dog gets reprimanded again, but a few days later greets me at the front door window. An entire foot of the bottom of the door has been systematically destroyed, and now he was happy. Story 11. My husband and I went away for a long weekend, fishing on the boat, camping, and so on. We kept the boat out at my parents' farm because they had a big shed. On Monday, I realized that I had lost my wedding ring. It could have been so many places. I looked for it, obviously, but I eventually came to the conclusion that it was gone forever, and I claimed insurance on it. Despite this, my mother claimed that it would come back to me and that my husband would be the one to find it. I thought she was crazy. Fast forward about 8 months later. The boat had been parked in another shed so my dad could use that one for the tractor. My husband was helping him with some tractor task and came running back to the house, got down on one knee, and presented me with my ring. Turns out I had lost it cleaning the boat and it had fallen into the mud where no one would ever find it. But then when the mud dried out and the tractor drove over it countless times, it reappeared on the very day that my husband was there to find it, just as my mother had predicted. Story 12. I once snuck out in high school and had those doors that set off alarms if they are opened when set that way and so on. So I had to sneak out of the basement window, which was an old school crank open window requiring removal of the screen, and for the window to stay open the entire time I was out so that I could close it from the inside when I got home. I successfully sneak out of the house and get to my getaway car when I realized I did not have my wallet, essential, and had me turning around to do a quick in and out of the house I just snuck out of 5 minutes previously. As soon as I am walking around the back of my house by my basement, the upstairs living room light turns on, and I hear my parents moving around. Panicked, I rush back inside, get the window closed, screen hidden, and snuck up the back staircase to my bedroom. My bed was obviously ruffled and the light on, so I pretended to be asleep in my closet, hoping they had not looked there, and I could get away with it. Long story short, I did not. It just so happens that a stray dog found our singular open window in our house in the suburbs and went upstairs and chose my parents to jump into bed with. So essentially, I would have gotten away with it if it were not for that meddling dog. Story 13. I have a few stories, but this one gets the most eye rolls due to its religious nature. I was kayaking with my mom, a couple of siblings, and a family friend who is a Catholic priest. Father got caught in a fallen tree in a particularly swift part of the river and capsized. After he popped back up, he quickly exclaimed that he lost his glasses. We all got out of our kayaks and started searching. It was not a good idea because of the current, but he was nearly blind without his glasses. We searched for a solid 15 to 20 minutes with no success. We all figured that the glasses were hundreds of feet downriver by then, lost to us for good. Father sighs and said that before giving up, we should ask for St. Anthony's help, as he is the patron saint of lost things. We stood no more than 20 feet downriver of where Father capsized and prayed for St. Anthony's intercession. When we said amen, Mom got this shocked look on her face. She bent under the water and picked up the glasses. She said she felt them tap against her foot when we ended our prayer. Folks rarely believe me when I tell this one, confidently telling me that my mom had had the glasses the whole time. She did not. Believe me, she wanted out of that cold Michigan river as much as the rest of us did. There was no reason for her to hold on to them. Story 14. Once as a child, I was riding bikes with a couple friends, and we stopped at one of their houses for a pit stop. It was at the bottom of a hill, and I was the second one to reach the bottom. I was going quite a bit too fast, and in my haste, I slammed on my front brake. I seem to have very good reaction times despite being somewhat clumsy sometimes, so I very often find myself saving things from disaster. This was one of those times. Somehow going completely on autopilot as my bike flipped forward at high speed from slamming on my front brake. I jumped off my bike, caught the handlebars, and both me and the bike landed upright like I was doing some kind of stunt. At least one of my friends witnessed it, but it happened so fast they were not quite sure what they saw. And I have not talked to either of them in years, so I would not know if they remembered it to confirm or not. But I swear, I have hidden talents. Bonus, I figured out how to fix Joy-Con drift, possibly permanently and without replacing the stick. But that one I can prove. Everyone I have told this to has believed me, but none of them have particularly cared. Oh well. Story 15. I was driving home one day in my 1991 Ford Bronco I owned at the time. It was 2016, so it was an old truck. One day I broke down and managed to coast to the side of the road. I was just starting my career as a mechanic then, at the age of 21. So as I am looking under the hood to see if anything obvious was wrong, an older gentleman came up to me and asked me if everything was all right. I told him, yes, I am okay, just broke down is all. He said, I see, I just thought I would check. This is my house. You are in front of. He told me he was a retired Ford mechanic and had fond memories working on these Broncos. He mentioned it is likely the ignition control module, as these often go bad on these trucks. I told him I would be surprised I had just replaced it. So we checked the fuel pressure and started troubleshooting, and he said, man, it really seems like it is the ignition control module. Hold on. He disappeared for about 10 to 15 minutes and comes back with an ignition control module in his hand. I could not believe it. We put it in, and she started right up. I was dumbfounded. Not only did I break down in front of a retired Ford mechanic, he had the exact part we needed to get it running. And for you non-car folks, this is not a generic part that will work on any car. It is specific to the exact engine I happen to have in my truck. When I offered to pay him, since the part is a few hundred from the dealer, he said absolutely not. He said, do you know how many times in my life I have picked that thing up and thought I should toss this away? I will never need it. And then said, nah, I will hang on to it. And I think it was just for this occasion, it was the most unbelievable thing to ever happen to me. That module was in my truck the entire time I owned it. Story 16. Myself and a few friends were getting chased by who we think were cops. Were wearing plain clothes and did not see them come from a police car, but they yelled police late at night after knock and running on multiple houses in the same street. We ran through a park to try and lose them, but they stayed about 20 meters behind us the whole time. We ran through a gap of houses onto a street and turned down it. I was in front of my friends by about 5 meters, so I did not see that they ducked in behind a house behind me. I ran about 4 houses further along, but was completely exhausted, so I just went into the front yard of the house next to me and hid behind a car in the driveway. The 2 guys walked past 10 seconds later saying things like, wow, they really thought we were cops and stuff like that to try and lure us out. They walked to the end of the dead-end street and turned around and walked past me as a police car came around the corner with a torch out the window. The guys then jumped into the yard next to me and laid on the ground hiding behind a bush, and I could see them clearly. The cop car did a lap of the street slowly, then drove away. I then foolishly jumped up after 10 seconds and went, wow, you guys tricked us. Basically believing their story that they were just messing with us, even though looking back, I wonder how did that cop car know to search that exact street at the exact time. Anyway, I looked in the yard next to mine, and they were gone. I was talking loudly as well, so if they were nearby hiding, they would come out and bust me. But they were nowhere to be seen. I had 100% seen them hiding next to me, and they did not jump into the cop car because I heard no doors open or close, and the car never went under 10 kilometers per hour when going down the street. They did not run behind the house they hid in front of because I was positioned behind them and would easily see if they got up and walked past me, and they did not run into the street because they would have definitely been seen by the car and myself. I looked around that street for 5 minutes, but my friends had already jumped the back fence of the house they were behind and assumed I had done the same, and I did not even know specifically what house they were behind. Then 5 minutes later, I hear people talking from pretty far away. I am standing next to a house, so I am covered by darkness, but it is the 2 guys who chased us walking down the street where the cop car came from, about 150 meters away. I am sitting there amazed because before that, I assumed they must have magically snuck behind the house they were in front of, which would have led right back to the park where they first appeared and started chasing us from. But this was the complete opposite direction, so it would not make sense to go that far, only to walk back to where you came from on the exact same path just 5 minutes later. They walked past me as I was hiding, just talking and laughing, but not saying anything about what just happened. I explained to my friends later how they just vanished from the yard next to me and appeared 5 minutes later with no explanation possible, and they just said, wow, that is crazy. But I know it is just because they do not want to be rude and say I am crazy. Story 17. Probably late here, but I have a few. I have always been surrounded by famous people of my country. One of the famous sports person lives in my street. They have a very lovely dog, and they are very kind. Also, a guy on the same street has the same name as our president. I never saw him, but their house looks pretty expensive and they have security cameras everywhere, so who knows? My mom is good friends with a famous skier because when his wife was giving birth, they were in the same room with my mom who was giving birth to me. My dad's high school friends formed a band that is pretty well known in the country. I see them a couple of times a year when they go out drinking with my dad. Also, my dad knows a lot of other famous people because he is a plumber and he has a lot of contacts. I remember when I was little I drew a lot and my dad was proud of me, so he always showed these famous politicians and sportsmen my drawings. Huge confidence boost though. Also around 2 years ago, we formed a band, I Am the Bassist, and on New Year's Eve we wanted to make our first gig. We invited 2 good friends, but like 8 other people came, mostly our moms and dads. But there was a guy we did not know. Turns out he was a singer and music producer. Story 18. My mom says I got a special gift because when I really wish something, it happens. Situation 1. She was driving. I was with her in the car. And when she was about to do a left to another street, she did not slow down. She just merged super fast and I jokingly said, "Hey, we need a police officer here to stop this lady. She is not driving properly." And I kid you not, a few streets down the road, a patrol appears out of nowhere. We did not think anything about it, but as soon as she drove at a proper speed past him, he started driving behind us. And he stopped her ahead of the road and I was like, "No." And he was like, "Where are you going?" And she said, "Home." And he asked, "Where did we live?" And we literally were 2 streets away from home. And he said, "Okay, go home, check your lights. One is not working fine. And like in that area, you never find an officer." How come right, the moment I asked for it, he showed up. Story 19. This one time my mom was about to go get groceries on her bicycle, and as she is about to leave, she realizes she forgot the cloth bag she always uses to carry everything. So she shouts at me to go get it for her, and I go out. Noticing she is already outside and I was too lazy to get the keys to the fence, I make it into a ball, and from about 5 meters away, I throw it at her, expecting she would catch it. But no. This bag was so intense it extended midair like it had a wingsuit and 20 years of training. It flew right over our 2-meter-tall metal fence, and since my mom had her bicycle resting against it, I was sure I overshot. Again, no. The bag did a backflip in the air, and avoiding my mom's attempts to catch it, it went right for the bicycle. At this point, everyone had already run for their lives because we were sure the bag was being piloted by an unknown terrorist that was about to launch a nuclear strike on us. I, knowing that running was pointless, stayed behind. As the bag finished its backflip, it found itself right where it needed to be. With the grace of a gazelle, it landed on the bicycle handlebar, and hanging from its own handles, it stared at me menacingly. No nuclear strikes were launched that day as the bag found mercy. Story 20. I woke my twin up from a coma when we were 3. We are fraternal twins. It was a last resort from the doctors before pulling the plug on him. They taped a landline phone to his head and called my mom. Dad was at the hospital with twin, and mom was at home, in a whole other city far away taking care of me and our older brother. And every single time his or my life has been in danger, the other twin has known instantly. Fraternal twins are not supposed to have the twin connection, especially not girl and boy twins, and absolutely not when one is severely disabled. But we communicated before we could speak. We still understand each other on a deeper level than anyone else. I woke him up from a very deep coma, and we instantly know if something is wrong with the other twin, which is good and exhausting at the same time. Even in adult life where we live separate lives, we are still as close as ever. There are several more stories people have deemed unbelievable, but this is the ultimate one where they always have to ask our parents for proof. We have lived a very different life from most people, despite being regular people. Story 21. Was doing a road trip with 2 of my friends in Norway a couple of years ago when we found 2 huge random caves in the cliffs next to the road in the middle of nowhere. Looked like unfinished tunnels for cars to drive through or something. In the first tunnel, there were cars after cars lined up in a row as far as we could see until the pitch black darkness swallowed what was behind them. So my friends decided they want to go have a look. They made a video of it, and I swear it is perfect horror movie material. They found matches and even opened the trunk of one of the cars, wondering if this was the only car without something or someone creepy in it. In the second tunnel, we found an old caravan with clothes and shoes lying around everywhere. So they decided to choose which one of them clothes they wanted to take with us. They all did not look that shabby, so I assume that they cannot have been there for too long. I tell you, creepy. When we went back to get to the car, a truck had parked at the same turnout, and a guy came out of it taking pictures of our car. He explained to us that these were his caves, him naturally stopping by the exact same time that we happened to be there, and people used to litter all over them. Poor guy. So we just went. After a couple minutes of driving, we stopped by the road and asked ourselves, did this really just happen? I was too scared to actually follow my friends into the darkness, so I swear if this had actually turned into a horror movie, I would have been the one girl to run away and tell everyone what happened, but nobody would believe me. Oh, did I mention that it was raining the whole time? Story 22. I was once on a bus ride that ended up having so many wild things going on that I was glad my friend was with me, or nobody would have believed it. First we had George. He was a middle-aged man with what looked like his brand new mail-order wife. He was trying to be all affectionate, and she was initially kind of okay with it, but eventually just tried to mind her own business. The bus was just about at max capacity when we left the terminal. First stop had a few people get on and fill the remaining seats, including super drunk dude who was about 3 rows in front of us. Second stop had a small group of girls get on who must have been out celebrating one of their birthdays. They clearly had a few drinks in them, but were not as gone as super drunk dude. They are forced to stand as all seats are taken. Eventually, one girl asked George if it would be okay if she sat or leaned on the armrest of his seat. George says you can sit on my lap instead like an absolute creep, and drunk girl sits on his lap. Then there is a woman at the front of the bus who starts screaming, "Oh my God, that is disgusting. Are you serious? And you are not even going to say anything at super drunk dude who had just had some kind of vomit or burp or cough thing and spattered bit of puke in a forward angle so that it hit the woman diagonally across from him. There were bits on her arm, in her hair, and on her book. She stormed off at the next stop. George starts having a pretty flirty conversation with this drunk girl in his lap. He is being not overt, but creepy. Oh, really? Then you are about the same age as my daughter. She is drunk, so she is going along with it. A few stops later, drunk girls and super drunk dude get off the bus. George starts trying to get all kissy with his wife or date beside him, who says no and stop multiple times. A guy behind us pipes up with, "She said no, buddy, leave her alone," to which George starts cussing at him. Things settle down a bit, but it is still tense. Bus reaches next stop and George and his date are about to leave. Now all the women on the bus are standing up and saying not to go with him because he clearly did not stop when she told him to. More shouting, George tries to square up to a guy half his age and built like a brick wall. A fight nearly starts and George ends up getting shoved and falling into my friend's lap. He had the aisle seat. My friend just puts his arm up across George like a belt so he cannot get up. More shouting and my friend just goes, "How about we all just relax a bit?" Bus driver starts yelling. George's date gets off the bus without George. George sits in his seat and starts cussing and swearing at everyone, and nearly gets hit again before he just sits angrily. 20 minutes later, he pipes up in a much more reasonable tone with, "I appreciate what you guys did without knowing any context. I would hope that if my daughter was in a situation like this, that there would be people like you to stand up and try to keep her safe." To which a bunch of others tried starting up with, "Oh, you cannot just change your mind," and so on. But we reminded them that things have had time to cool off and he could look at the scenario differently. He got off at the following stop and we spent the next 10 minutes just shocked at the story we would have to tell. Story 23. This is weird, but my friend's big sister tried to drown me when I was about 10. Me, my friend, and her sister were swimming in a big lake with their mom watching us. There were about 8 to 10 other people swimming too. I was playing with my friend, and her sister just comes up to me and literally for no reason takes a hold on my head and pushes me underwater. She held me there for about 20 seconds and I was starting to panic. Then she just let me go and left. I do not understand how no one saw her do it. My friend never mentioned it. Her mom, who was supposed to watch us, did not notice, and neither did the bunch of people around us. I was scared to tell anyone because no one ever said anything, and I had not experienced anything that scary before. A year or so later, it was summer again, and we were going swimming, but I stayed on the beach. When asked about it, I said I was not going swimming if her sister was there, because last summer she tried to drown me. Everyone, the sister included, were confused as to what I was talking about. No one believed me, and even the sister was super confused and genuinely could not remember it. Story 24. Dumb fishing stories. But I went out one day and caught 2 fish in the strangest ways. The first fish swallowed a spinner at just the right depth to bite down on the snap swivel. The swivel ended up hooking the fish in the lip, and I brought it in with that. No clue how or what happened, but the spinner came off the snap swivel completely, but the fish stayed on the snap swivel. Had a hard time getting the spinner back. An hour or so later, I was using a popper and hooked a fish. It was fighting really good up till it jumped. Then my line got incredibly heavy. Turns out when the fish jumped, its tail caught the other hook set, and the thing was hooked in both the mouth and the tail. Came in looking like a donut. I was terrified to unhook the thing, figured it would start thrashing the second it could, but nope. Just unrolled and let me unhook it. Swam off like nothing happened. Never had anything like either of those things happen before or since. Both in the same trip. Story 25. Okay, this story actually happened. Every Tuesday, I think my class was going to a public sport place. It was pretty big. It had a pool and a handball court where we would do physical education. I really did not like to go there, especially when we were going to the pool a year before off topic, but it had a giant water slide because I did not like to go to the showers and see a naked man. But one day after normal training, me and my best friend were the last people to still dress to our normal clothes. The changing room was connected to another changing room. It will be important later. So we had keys to close the changing room, give it back to a worker, and go home. Seems easy enough, right? We were talking about ghosts, and it was silent. Then the door to the other changing room just violently opened and closed with a loud bang. We immediately ran out of the room. I started running while my friend was closing the room. My heart was beating hard and I was scared. My friend explained to the worker that someone slammed the door, so we went with the worker to the changing room and no one was there. We would see and hear this person running away, but we did not. We went home traumatized. Okay, it could not have been wind because there were no windows. My friend that witnessed it still says it is just wind, but the thought still haunts me to this day. Story 26. Like 20 years ago, me and 2 friends missed the bus to school, so we started hitchhiking. The school was 30 minutes away and we live in Hawaii, where it was pretty much safe to do. This crazy guy, obviously on substances, is driving in the opposite direction, so he pulls over across the road to ask us where we are going. We tell him, and he says he can take us. He does not even bother to check traffic and just pulls into the road trying to flip around to our side of the road to pick us up. He slams into a lady who bashes her head on the windshield and is bleeding everywhere. Dude was not wearing a seatbelt and goes flying out of the car like a rag doll. The substances must have been crazy good because he hops up, gets back into the car with one wheel nearly sideways. Gas tank leaking out while we scream he is going to blow himself up, and manages to get the car off the road. Then he reaches into the back seat, pulls out a brown paper bag, takes out a bento Hawaiian-style quick lunchbox and starts eating. Police come, we tell them what happened, then another friend on her way to school sees us and picks us up, and we spend the rest of the day telling the entire high school what happened that morning. Story 27. My whole life story. I was born to an abusive father and narcissistic mother. My father abandoned us, and my mother remarried. My first memories are of my stepbrother's funeral after he drowned in a neighbor's pool. I was adopted by my stepfather. I have survived 3 house fires. As an adult, one of my roommates caught the other using my computer to download child content, and after the offending roommate was caught, he went to the police and said he just found it. The ensuing legal battle took over a year and cost me my career, and my partner at the time. Even after I was exonerated, I was still treated with a massive stigma and forced to move back in with my parents. The guy who actually did it was never investigated because he had family members in the local government and police forces, so it was all ultimately swept under the rug. I have been stalked twice in my life by different people. Met a woman online that would end up becoming my wife, and I moved 3,500 miles from home to make it work, and we now have a 2-year-old of our own. Only to find out less than 3 years after moving to a new continent, my dad was diagnosed with leukemia and stage 4 bone cancer. My narcissistic mother has spent the last few months he has been in treatment, complaining about how it affects her trips. Story 28. My wife and I drove through a rainbow in Oregon about 6 years ago. I know. As I understand the science, that does not happen, except that it did. And before anyone suggests it, yes, we were in Oregon, but no, there were no substances involved. We were on the freeway with several other cars just after it rained. In the middle distance, there was a rainbow. It appeared to be getting closer, not in any way that seemed abnormal per se, but it was noticeable. A few seconds later, after we got even closer, the outline of the bow started to disappear. Suddenly, and only for a second, we noticed subtle hues of the color spectrum right in front of the car and stretched across the highway. My wife and I looked at each other like, what? That did not just happen, right? We were really excited and equally confused, even texting a friend about it. However, a few minutes later, we sort of forgot it happened and distracted ourselves with the drive. Fast forward a couple of days to telling some friends about it. They were adamant about the fact that what we thought we saw was physically impossible, even explaining why the science does not allow you to drive through or even get near a rainbow. But again, it happened to us. I did question whether or not we just got fooled by our senses, and instead of driving through a rainbow, we just witnessed some rare optical illusion caused by the angle of the sun and our wet windshields and so on, but I still could not shake the feeling that we were right. Story 29. Really lame, but this is my story. Back in college, I worked as a resident assistant. We kept some petty cash at the front desk with which to make change for residents and buy incidentals for the office. I worked the front desk until midnight one night and then at 8 in the morning the next day. A resident whom I did not know needed to make change that night, so I changed her 20 bill. Knowing we would need to break that bill down again, I went to retrieve it the next morning when everything opened. It was gone. I immediately called the director and said, "Hey, 20 is missing from petty cash." She sounded suspicious. Made sense to me that she would. 7 people on the staff, and we all have keys to the office. Well, I had done my part by reporting it and did not give it another thought. It was not my job to investigate the staff. Suddenly, a couple weeks later, our staff is called in for a meeting with the head of campus housing. He gave a vague and general speech about how the college stands for honesty and integrity before bringing up the theft. Everyone on the staff turned to look at me as I realized he was not addressing all of us. He was speaking directly to me. Somehow everyone assumed I had taken the money because I was the one who reported it. They then all took turns providing evidence that I was guilty because she needs it more than we do. Or once she borrowed quarters for laundry and has not paid it back yet, or worst of all, how else would she have known exactly how much was missing? I was shocked, hurt, and no matter what I said or did, they did not believe me. Nothing came of it beyond that meeting, thankfully, but that was enough for me. It has been 17 years and I am still bitter. Story 30, I have shared it before, but my ex had hermit crabs for pets. If you do not know, they love walking around in water and keeping water in their shells. No matter how tidily you might set it up, they will almost always dirty the water, and it needs regular changing. One morning I noticed one of the hermit crabs has climbed to the top of the tallest piece of decor in the tank, facing us in the apartment, waving one claw back and forth. I had never seen this kind of behavior before, so I watched for a bit as they just kept waving the claw back and forth. Eventually I get closer to see what is up, do not really notice anything above the crab that might have caught its interest, but did notice that the water was dirty. I just replaced the water, so one of them probably was waiting for a fresh dip. Kind of forgot about the claw waving and replaced the water again. Another bit of time later, I noticed the same behavior. Based on the shell, I am pretty sure it was the same crab, atop the decorations and facing us on the couch, waving one claw back and forth. I go check because what is going on, right? This time I am distracted by an overturned bowl, but do recognize the pattern here. I eventually started calling this one Crab the Senator. Every now and then, they would climb up and do their little wave at us, and we would find something amiss in the tank. It was handy because no matter how diligent you are, there is always a chance a pet is going to make a mess. The Senator was on top of signaling to us as soon as something was up. I also like to think about how weird it might have been for that crab. Just stress dancing your cares away, and this hand swoops in to fix things. Story 31. Many years ago, two of my friends and I were hanging out at the mall trying to figure out a way to get a ride a few towns over to buy stuff. A kid a few years younger than we were, who followed us around and hung out with us, chimes in and says I can get my grandmother to take us. At first, this obviously sounded like a terrible idea. Get this kid's grandmother to drive us to the part of a town where one can easily buy from someone hanging out in front of a house. But the idea also sounded so funny I had to encourage it. So I lead the charge and said, sure, give her a call. So he uses the payphone and calls her up and asks if she can bring us to pick up a friend a few towns over. A few minutes later, this old woman, probably in her 70s, pulls up in front of the mall in this early 1980s import station wagon. The four of us pile in and off we go. The kid up front with grandma, the three of us crammed in the back seat. My friend starts giving directions. Along the way, the kid up front is telling grandma this story about how our friend just flew back into town and needed a ride to the mall. The whole trip, we are trying hard not to laugh at how insane this situation seemed. As we pull into that town and start heading down the street, my friend rolls down the window and calls out to a group of people standing in front of a house. Weed, they said, no man, down the street. So my friend says it is a few houses down to grandma. At this point, the kid chimes in and tells grandma we call him Weed, because one time he gave his girlfriend flowers, but they were just a bunch of weeds, so that is how he got the nickname. As soon as he finishes the sentence, my friend calls out to the next group of people, Weed. They call back, yes, I got you. So my friend says, stop here, I will go get him. He jumps out of the car, buys it, and hops back in saying, oh man, he already got a ride to the mall. He is back there waiting for us. So the kid apologizes to grandma. Sorry, grandma, can you bring us back to the mall? She happily says yes, and off we go. We got back to the mall and got high. I have told the story a million times, and I am not sure anybody believes it. Story 32, I worked a boring data entry temp job at a car recycling plant, like they crushed up old cars for about 1 week. I basically just had to create digital records of their old handwritten forms, going through giant piles of old records, manually typing in names and numbers. I started going absolutely crazy from boredom after about 4 days and started to write a horror story about a kid who worked at a car recycling plant and started to notice weird things going on after finding a death certificate mixed in with the records. Ultimately realizing the big warehouse all the cars were being dropped into was actually housing a giant monster, and the monster would eat the cars, which were also filled with dead bodies. Anyway, no joke, one day after I started writing that story, I found a death certificate mixed in with the recycling records. It was one of those things like, I just stared at it thinking, this cannot be real. But at the same time, it was right there in my hands. I still have it home at my mom's house in my old room. Next day, I walked out of that job a couple of hours early because I just could not stand doing data entry anymore. I was like 17 years old and just did not care. Then got a call from the temp agency saying I was fired. So I never figured out if there was a monster in their warehouse or not. Story 33. Okay, this is going to sound crazy, and before I tell this, let me clarify that I was sober when this happened. A couple years ago, I went to go pick up a friend because we were going to hang out. I got to her house, and the way her house is set up, you have to walk past her kitchen window to reach her door. As I was walking past the window, I looked inside, and I saw her mom. Her hair was wet, and she was wearing a green sweater. This is important for later. We locked eyes, and she nodded her head up like, what is up? And I nodded back. She continued walking toward the door, and on the side of her door are these little windows. I peeked through them because I assumed she was about to come open it, but she just walked right by. I thought that was weird, so I walked back over to the kitchen window and saw my friend, who was not previously there when I had just walked by. I did not think much of it. I assumed she had just entered the room. I waved to her and got her attention, and she came to open the door. We chatted for a second, and her mom came over to say hi, her hair still wet and still wearing that sweater. I was like, hey, I saw you walk by the door. I thought you were going to open it, but you just walked right by. She looked at me with confusion and said, what are you talking about? I just got out of the shower and have been in the bathroom for the past 15 minutes. The bathroom is on the left of the front door, while the kitchen is on the right, so you have to pass the door to get there. So that was extra confusing. I was just as confused and replied, what are you talking about? We just saw each other through the kitchen window. We locked eyes and head nodded at each other. My friend was like, I was the only one in the kitchen, and no one has come in or out of there in a while. I thought they were messing with me, but they were dead serious, and they are not the kind of people to let a joke continue on like this. I have never been so confused in my life. And I know that I did not just imagine it, because how on earth could I have just imagined exactly how her mom was looking at that time, with the wet hair and the same shirt? She still thinks my brain was tricking me, but I know what I saw. It was way too long and way too clear of an interaction. It was definitely a glitch in the matrix. Story 34. I am a happily married man now. Back in high school, I was a solid 4 out of 10 nerd. This story comes from my high school perspective, not so much my married man perspective. Anyways, this one mostly popular girl was having a graduation party at a drive-in movie theater and invited me along with most of the graduating class. She was fairly popular, especially in the band world. She was on the color guard and a solid 8+. Her friends were easily in the same hotness range. I barely knew this girl, but we had calculus together, and I had been invited to like 3 graduation parties total, so I went. Only like 5 people showed up. It was kind of crazy because she was way more popular than that. Maybe someone else more popular was having a party at the same time. I will never know. Point is, the 6 of us did not fit super comfortably in a single truck, but we did fit really well in my minivan, which I had pulled the seats out of and filled with beanbag chairs. So there I am, in the back of the minivan. It is me, 1 other guy, and 5 girls. And these girls are basically laying right on me and snuggled up with me because we are in a minivan. We saw 2 movies back to back with me basically holding multiple girls, talking and laughing the whole time. It was wild, but it was just the start. This party somehow evolves into the popular girl, we will call her Angie, inviting everyone back to her place. I am like, well, it is like 1 in the morning, but my parents did not give me a curfew. I am in no curfew because I was too straight edge to ever do anything bad. I once got busted by the cops for being out at 2 in the morning, writing nice messages in chalk in the park. Angie's house, we all end up in the basement. We are tired, so we all end up going to sleep downstairs. The other guy and 1 girl he is totally into are on the floor, and I am on the futon with the 3 girls. I am playing with one of the girls' hair and trying as best as nerdy me can to flirt. The next thing I know, this 8 out of 10 girl has her tongue down my throat and we are making out. It was wild. I went from having never been kissed to making out with this color guard girl on a bed with her best friend right next to us. After what feels like forever, we finally pull away, and I am in a total haze. I just had my first kiss, and then it hits me. Angie is literally on the other side of me right now. What do? So I sheepishly roll over to see how she is reacting to me making out with her best friend. And she is just all smiles. Like, nice work. And I am like, what? She is not mad. And then we start making out. And Angie is way more intense than her best friend. She has got her tongue down my throat. She is putting my hands on her chest over the clothes, but I still pulled my hands away like right away. Because I was a good kid, she is way into it. So we finish making out and I am just laying on my back in total bliss. Not only did I have my first kiss, but I also had my second kiss. And it is with these 2 hot girls I barely knew. The dust settles, my mind clears, and I realize what is going on. Earlier in the night, I had admitted to having never been kissed. These scheming women had decided to help me out, and I am at like 2 for 3. So I mentioned that I should probably get heading home. It was 3 in the morning at this point, and girl number 3 offers to walk me to my car. At my car, she looks me in the eyes and asks if I am going to kiss her. So we kiss. Number 3 was the weakest kiss of them all, but still. Story 35. I woke up one morning in the summer, got up and went to the bathroom, came back and was going to get back into bed. But when I pushed the sheets back, a bumblebee was wrapped up in my sheets, exactly where I had been laying only minutes before. He had not flown there while I was going to the bathroom. Rooms are attached with no door. I would have heard him buzzing around. So movie me, I slept with a bumble. He was very carefully removed and released. Alternatively, about 4 months ago, bought a new bed, had it delivered. Was super excited as my old bed was all springs and much overdue for an upgrade. So I popped a Benadryl, prepared to sleep for the next 15 hours or so. 2 o'clock in the morning, I hear what sounds like a giant boot stepping on a leaf. Wakes me out of a dead sleep. I roll over and turn on the little lamp next to my bed and look down at the ground. And right there, staring right back at me, is a frog, roughly the size of a computer mouse, fairly good-sized. Now again, I am on an allergy pill, so I grab my phone and make a video because I am like, this cannot be happening. Frog sits very nicely for the video. I still have it on my phone. The instant I stand up, he hops under my bed. An hour-long game of cat and mouse with a very crafty frog until he is captured underneath a bowl. Very carefully make it through several closed doors of my shared house with no pants and no shoes on to let him outside. It is torrential downpouring. Now completely soaked from head to toe, slip and fall on the tile inside the front door and sprain my knee. Story 36. For decades, people have accidentally called me Josh. This is not anywhere close to my real name. From people I have just met to teachers, friends, co-workers, and even family members. It started happening when I was a teenager and was most frequent in my 20s and early 30s. Now it only happens once every month or two. When we were first married, my wife did not believe me until she saw it happen several times. Sometimes the person catches it and says something like, "Why did I just call you that?" But more often they do not even notice. What is really funny is when a professor would call on me as Josh and my friends would notice, but the professor just kept talking. But the absolute best was when I received a phone call from someone in the financial aid office when I was in grad school. The guy asked for Josh, and I just said wrong number and hung up. My wife asked who they were looking for, and when I said Josh, she told me to call them back because they were clearly looking for me. I called back, explained that I had just got a call from that number, but they gave the wrong name. The guy from the financial aid office was very confused and told me that he had my paperwork on the desk in front of him with my name printed on it, and he had no idea why he called me Josh. Story 37. In high school, I went for a run with a guy I was training Kung Fu with. In retrospect, I do not think our instructor was qualified. This was a vaguely Appalachian place, but not deep in the area. We ran down this little side street and ended up on a dead-end road, which we ran to the end of. The last house had a chain-link fence, and somehow the gate was not secured. 8 to 12 small dogs came barreling out of the yard headed straight for our ankles. You know the scenes where Jackie Chan's uncle makes him jump on all the pots and crockery, and he keeps knocking them over and moving them. Valid training added to our regimen immediately after. The owner came out quick and sorted it before there were any injuries to man, beast, or Kung Fu demigod. We stopped at a fast food place on the way home, and walking back with a giant soda, my buddy and I are laughing about the whole thing. I laugh as I am drinking so hard I choked and vomited my meal on the main road just as a red convertible rolled by full of the most popular girls in high school. So I lost my virginity at 20. Story 38. In 1999, Flea from the band Red Hot Chili Peppers held my girlfriend's hair up while she was sick on a sidewalk and then signed her chest. My girlfriend and I had got drunk one night and somehow ended up walking down a sidewalk through a random neighborhood in Daytona Beach, Florida. The neighborhood was practically dead, no cars or people around, when all of a sudden a van pulled past us and parked about 20 feet ahead of where we were walking. 2 guys stepped out and came over and told us they were with the band Red Hot Chili Peppers and were lost in the area. We had no idea where we were either, so we could not help them. But when one of the guys saw my girlfriend go to be sick, he quickly grabbed her hair and held it up while she did. I was not specifically a huge fan or anything of the band, but for some reason I was so excited that I had taken out a marker and shoved it in one of the guys' faces while asking for an autograph. My girlfriend, apparently better, seemed to recognize my enthusiasm, saw that I did not have anything for him to sign, and took out her chest. Flea grabbed the marker and signed it. Then they hopped back in their van and drove away. People tend to tell me I was drunk, so it was probably some random people saying they were the band. But I later have looked at pictures of Flea from the band and immediately recognized him.